Well, we're at Het Loo at the moment, Het Loo Palace in the Netherlands, Apeldoorn, almost in the middle of the country. Former royal residence, but the estate is much older. It started as a medieval estate, and it was bought in 1684 by William of Orange, who made this posh summer residence, this large hunting and summer palace with an enormous garden, one of his palaces. Well, it's still a royal residence. It's not only a museum. The old castle is a royal residence at the moment, and there is another villa where the sister of the former Queen Beatrix is living, and the entire royal estate covers more than 10,000 hectares. And the formal garden, which is most famous with public and others, it covers about 7 hectares. So it's only a small amount. And the entire royal park, which is fantastic, covers 650 hectares. So it's worth a visit. A little bit about myself. I started as a gardener in 1983. I've been assistant head gardener for a long time, and since 2007 I was head gardener until recently. Well, I'm a bit older, as you can see, and now I'm a garden advisor, but still on the run. Well, let's start. I'd like to start with my presentation, and it will be mainly. It's called the Quest for a Hedge. We started with Hedges, 27 kilometers. And we have learned a little bit about it, and we had to experience diseases and the attacks of the box moth, etc. So, it was not always an easy path. I always say a garden like Het Loo is like riding on a wild horse. The next slide. Well, we are in around 1980, the end of the 70s, and the palace. It was a whitewashed palace, but it was a house more than a palace, and it was restored back to the 17th century. And after some discussion, it was also decided that the main garden, the main part of the formal garden, should also be excavated to see if enough was rested for a complete restoration. So you can see the workers here digging up the garden. And it was astonishing what they discovered. The garden was covered with almost 2 meters of sand, and all the fountains, all the walls were rediscovered. And even, that's why I'm showing it here on the right, the corner of the parterres, which was very important for the measure of the parterres. And they also could see how thick the hedges were. Only they forgot it was not a 17th century hedge what they discovered, but the garden was covered with sand in 1806, so it must have looked different in those days. Yes. Oh. Yeah. Well, it's not only archaeology, but there was another important feature, and that's the Van Staden map. It was drawn in the first quarter of the 18th century by Christian Peter van Staden, who was the nephew of another van Staden. His uncle was caretaker of Het Loo, and so the young Christian Peter must have been often at Het Loo. And it was not the design he made, but we assume that he drew the existing garden, and so it also matches with the descriptions of and the etchings of the garden. And this has in the 1980s and also recently been the plan that we have used to reconstruct the garden. Well, this is 1983. Just short before the opening, and an enormous amount of box was needed in the garden. You can imagine all those intricate patterns of box. And they bought around 300,000 box plants in France and another 100,000 in the Netherlands. And the entire lower garden, the main part of the garden, was planted with French box. It was a very dense type. Slow growing and unfortunately turning a bit too brown in the winter. And it was bought at Renault nurseries in northern France. Well, 1984, the garden was ready. It was not exactly according to the plan of von Staden. You can see a lot of red gravel was used outside and on the inside white gravel. And the hedges were much thicker as they were shown on the map of von Staden. It was the choice of the architect and of the garden committee that was involved in the restoration. Well, here you can see the opening in 1984 in June. It was a very warm day and of course a big feast with sparkling fountains. They worked after more than 200 years. And well, it was a fantastic day, and you can see Queen Beatrix was happy with the result. She was one of the promoters of the restoration, and she played quite a role in the preparations of the reconstruction. Well, and this was what it looked after some years. You see those box hedges, often planted in 3 rows. Well, we heard this morning that boxes needed light, and well, if you plant them so close together, the inner row of box suffers for a lack of light and a lack of nurture. The soil in Apeldoorn is also a topic. We have a sandy soil. And yeah, you really have to feed the plants, not only the box, but all the plants to keep them alive. And you can imagine that that box with the clipping every year, it needs a lot of manure and so on. So after several years, we really had a problem with keeping the box in a good condition. The other thing was, besides the soil, was the edging of the box. The edges were made of a kind of plastic. We call it hostalit, to keep the box in the right position and to keep the earth divided from the gravel. But well, this plastic it doesn't fit very well with the soil, and every year it came up a little bit due to frost, and it had to be beaten back. And after some years, plastic is deteriorating and it's falling apart. So, well, after several years, we had a reason to replant the garden. Well, in the upper garden, this is the upper garden, the northern part of the garden. Some remains of the landscape park were left, a lot of trees, and after 20-30 years, most of the trees were in a bad condition and were removed. So we had also a reason to recreate the upper garden, which turned out to be mainly a grass garden, grass patterns. It was the height of fashion in the late 17th century and the early 18th century. So we changed this design a little bit, but we still needed another 20,000 box plants for the edging of this parterre over here. Well, learning about plastic hostalit edges in the garden is one thing. I said I never want to see plastic again in the garden, and we have to go for a more sustainable solution. And this, what you see here, is cotton steel, kind of steel mixed with a little bit of copper. And well, we have tested it before by burying parts in the garden, and they stayed well after many years. So this was a choice we made. So you are assured that the form of the garden keeps in shape, and if you work in the garden, it's good with everything. If you clip the edges, steel is better than plastic. And well, after it's filled with earth, you almost see nothing of it because it turns brown. But yeah, then this 20,000 new box plants, it was the same variety as we have used in other parts of the garden. It was a typical Dutch old-fashioned type of box, unnamed, but they did very well for many years. So we thought we go on with this type of box. And but well, it seems that after 6 weeks, the box plants were infected with Calonectria, with the much feared box blight, and so we had to deal with an infected garden, with an infected upper garden. The nursery provided us at once with a mix of chemicals and a complete spraying scheme, which told me enough because well, They could have said before that the plants were infected, but that was too late. They reacted well on this chemical treatment, but the spores were still alive, and we had to fear they went on further. And of course, we didn't want to go on with the chemical treatment of the box. Well, the next disaster happened 1 year later. It was 2009 in July. It's a very hot day. And well, Het Loo and Apeldoorn are the area in the Netherlands where most of the rain is falling. We have the highest amount of rain of the entire country. But this was extreme. In 1 hour, 150 millimeters was falling. The entire garden was flooded. You could go through it with a canoe. And also the basement of the palace was completely filled with water. So it was there was a lot of damage. And well, though the water in the garden disappeared quickly after a few hours, and of course a lot of rubbish was left in the garden. But the worst thing was all the spores from the upper garden had infected all the other box plants as well. So we had to deal with that, and at first we started to do a little bit more spraying. Well, a closer look at the parterre of the box parterres in the garden. You can see the thick planting and also some of the infection. This is not Calonectria, this is a Volutella. It's a secondary infection, and it has something to do also with plants in a bad condition. You can see the deteriorating plastic edges. You see the Volutella, and you see also the result of many years of clipping, and the plants did not grow very well anymore. So, and the next disaster was also on its way, still in France and the southern Netherlands. It hasn't hit Het Loo yet, but only 1 year later we had to greet the box moths. Well, as you have heard this morning, it's not that difficult to fight the box moths with Bacillus thuringiensis. The name of the product of the stuff that you can use here in the Netherlands is Turex, and it works very well if you use it on the right time. But well, we kept on searching for alternatives for box. We are still 27 kilometers, and also spraying your garden is an enormous job. And if you have to do that several times a year, it's very labor intensive. Well, we searched for help, of course, and we ended up in Bad Zwischenahn in Germany at the Lehr- und Versuchsanstalt für Gartenbau und Landwirtschaft, so to say, a research station for agriculture and nurseries. And Heinrich Belz was a fabulous assistant for us, and he helped us to look for alternatives. And they also had a test ready in their premises with, I think, 40 or 50 types of box, and also other evergreen hedges. On the background you see Ilex crenata, and on the foreground you see many types of box. They published it all, so it was a fantastic help for us. We also visited nurseries in the Netherlands. On your right-hand side, you see the Buxus Green Velvet, and that looked promising. It's a Sempervirens type. It looked promising in the beginning, but and we planted a pilot piece on our own nursery. But after 2 years, they got infected as well. So not on an enormous scale, but we didn't dare to go further with it. Well, the decision was made to continue with another plant, with Ilex crenata, the Japanese holly. And there is a Dutch nursery, Stolwijk, and they have produced a new variety called the dark green, which looks almost similar to Bok. Well, as I said, every cloud has a silver lining, and it was also an opportunity to look at the design of the garden. The 1980s design, in the 1980s design, you saw a lot of very thick hedges, often planted 3, 4, 5 rows thick, and it had a completely different appearance than the Van Staden map, which should have been the first thing to look at. So we made a design based on the Van Staden map, but of course it had to be translated to the size of the garden and to the measurement of today. That's what you see on the left. Well, very small hedges. This is the Japanese holly. And, well, plants, that's an English saying that it should be edging and not hedging. And that's what we try to achieve. And, well, this, of course, is the beginning. And, well, our garden looked much different than before after the treatment. Here you see the difference. The old garden, more or less the red garden with a lot of red gravel and quite thick hedges. Beautiful in its own right. And on the right side, you see the entire garden recreated from 1908 onwards. First the upper garden with the grass patterns, and then the other gardens followed. And well, it was quite a job. It took a few years, every year part of the garden, and I think in 4 years' time we did the entire garden. It was a time-consuming but a highly interesting project, I can say, and I learned a lot about formal gardens. Here another map on your left-hand side. You can see the Queen's Garden with this really thick hedges. In a way beautiful, but it looked a bit like an old garden as you find them in France or Italy. Gardens were existing for perhaps several hundreds of years. And well, it was not the effect that was drawn or made in the 17th century. And on your right-hand side, the same garden. I think this was 2015, with the exact pattern from the Van Staden map with the different types of gravel and color, surrounded by small hedges. Here's the result after 1 year. They did very well, the Ilex crenata, and there were also plantsman's gardens. So it was important that you could see the flowers and the plants and the exotic plants very well. It was not, the box wouldn't play the head role in the garden. On your back you can see another feature. It was a bower made of hornbeam in the 17th century, made of Dutch elm. But of course, the Dutch elm can't be planted anymore due to the elm disease. Well, we thought we were ready with our new plants, but it didn't prove to work out very well in the beginning. Ilex crenata is a beautiful plant, but it needs very acid soil. And it hates chalk, and it also hates wet feet. So your garden needs to be very well drained, and you can't plant them in soil with a lot of chalk. So the atmosphere of the substantial of the garden, of the soil, had to be very, very acid. So we redug all the plants, and we retreated the soil with white peat. And the drainage was improved, and so after this treatment, well, the plants were happy, and now they are looking fantastic. This was the first year after planting, and well, you can see this Ilex crenata is they're growing like madmen, much faster than both. And that's what I can say about this type of Ilex. It's beautiful, but you have to be aware that you have to clip them more than once in a year. Depending on the situation, I think up to three times a year. And we do have 27 kilometers of hedges. And well, that's really something. And you need a lot of labor to do the clipping. I will tell a little bit more about the clipping later on and the way we are doing that. This is the result after clipping. And so our garden looks now. I think this picture is from last summer. And well, I'm quite satisfied with the results. And here you can see how Baroque gardens are meant to be. Low hedges, and the pattern of the different types of gravel has to be seen very well. And the plants are also playing a kind of a major role in the garden. They have to be admired from all sides, and they were often very precious and collector's items as well. Well, then we come to the clipping of the hedges. As I said, 27 kilometers. And in the 1980s, we started just with the hedge scissors to clip them. But yeah, you can imagine 3 sides on each hedge, 27 kilometers. And it is horrifying for your backbone. And we have also to deal nowadays with health and safety regulations. And it's just said, well, you have to find alternatives for clipping this enormous amount of hedges. You can't have your gardeners, you can't replace your gardeners every 4 or 5 years because they have backbone problems. So we have developed a few types of gear. Before this, the types you see here, we had a larger machine with the hedge shear placed on a kind of a pole, which was moved up and down with the gravel. So it didn't went with every stone, but it stayed in a horizontal position. It worked quite well, but it was also quite a large machine. And what was the benefit? It was fine that we used the cotton steel edges, because they could be used as a kind of a rail for the clipping machinery that we are using now. It's quite simple. You have a small wheel or a copper block, and your little machine is placed on top of it, and the people can hold it, and they can walk in an upright position, and it works rather quick. And we have 2 types, one for the horizontal position and one for the sides of the hedges. And the benefit is also that people who are not completely skilled gardeners can work with it, and they can work with it safe. It's all electric. Of course, you need a lot of batteries, but you can have a set of batteries behind the screen and replace it, well, I think twice a day. And then you can continue to work for the entire day. And well, it works much quicker than the old-fashioned clipping with your hands. Let's have a look. Yeah. Well, the old garden still fantastic, especially from the top of the palace where you can see the pattern. And here they are still clipping with hedge scissors. And it's also important to remove the leaves and the branches that are fallen down. And so the gardeners developed a kind of a Hoover machine by themselves. You see this lorry, and the leaves are hoovered from the parterre. So it leaves the stones, but it takes away the leaves. So it still works very well. Yeah, you see Italian colleagues from the garden from northern Italy, La Venera Reale, and we explain how this machinery is working. And of course, you need to do some maintenance on the machine. You have to be cleaned intensively every day, and also they have to be sharpened quite often. Well, back to Christian Peter van Staden and the old map. Here you can see more closely how the pattern of the gravel, the hedges, and so on is divided in the garden. And well, this map is translated into a modern design, a modern working map. And then the next development. I think many people have heard from the Herplant nurseries in Belgium. For many years, I've kept contact with Didier Hermans, the owner of the nursery, and he has almost on a scientific way. He has been crossing and interbreeding with box plants, and not the common box Luxus sempervirens, but many Asian types of box. And the idea is that the Asian types of box are aware of the box moth, who is also Asian, originates from Asia. And these box, they have quite a thicker layer of wax. And The box, the Calonectia cannot come into the leaves, so they do not affect this box. And the box moth, also especially the caterpillars of the box moth, don't like to eat these types. Well, of course, we want to see before you plant the entire garden with this new type of box. So we dedicated one garden, the King's Garden, with around 20,000 new box plants in 3 varieties. I think this is the largest trial plot in Europe at the moment. Another trial plot is in Herrenhaus in Germany, and in Villandry, this famous, I would like to say Gemüsegarten, but it's a vegetable garden in France on the Loire River. So there are 3 main plots at the moment in Europe. I think we planted our garden in 2019. And well, they seem to do very well. What you see in front of you is this rose is planted with a type of Renaissance. And the other plants here inside the parterre, that's the variety Babylon Beauty. Babylon Beauty refers to the hanging gardens of Babylon, of course, and there it's more or less a ground covering type of box. And the benefit of this type is that it's ideal for very low hedges, because it's close very good on the soil, on the gravel. That's what you can see here. The Renaissance looks almost the same. I think it's a little bit darker. And on the outside, you can see it on the middle picture with the daisies. The heritage is it turns a little bit brownish orange in the winter. I do not think we are continuing with that type, but it's good to have a test. And DJ Hermans is developing much more varieties of box at the moment. I often visited his nursery. It's just across the Dutch border in Belgium. And well, I was really impressed by the enormous amount of box types that he has shown. I think thousands of them. And so from all those thousands of new plants who are all different, only a few remain, of course, to continue with. So that was a large investment. And well, this type of box is not widely available at the moment. It's coming up, of course. I think in a few years there will be enough to provide more gardens in Europe with fresh box. And I think this is a fantastic development. We had this drama, this catastrophe with box behind us, and now we are in a new phase where we can use box again. So that, well, I think this is a hopeful solution, not with a box interference, but with still box. And well, I'm also happy with Iris crenata, but you have to think you have to clip them 2 or 3 times a year, and that's yeah, time is money, and it will need a lot of extra labor to do so. And well, that's the main problem in the Netherlands and also in other countries. I think good gardeners are hard to find. So, well, I'm happy with this very positive development in the informal gardens, and I hope we will be safe for the future with this new type of box. Here you have them: the Palace Study, the King's Garden, the Heritage, which turns a little bit brown orange in the winter, and the 2 other varieties are, in my opinion, fantastic and very suitable for formal gardens, the Renaissance and certainly the Babylon Beauty. And we will continue this year to replant the Queen's Garden with those 3 varieties, and we will add a small amount of Rococo. That's a new variety. Also very suitable for formal gardens, and let's see what they are going to do. So keep in touch, I would say, and for the moment, yeah, this is my presentation. And well, I hope to thank you for your attention.